Hi there, I am MC Mura, and although this is typically a fighting game channel, specifically a Street Fighter channel, Ninja Gaiden 2 is my favorite video game of all time. I have beaten it on all of the different versions, beaten it on Master Ninja numerous times. I had already made a guide on how you can get better at the game, the different strategy, but today we're gonna talk about the weapons and the characters, since I know that a lot of you are fans of the female roster as well, and you can pick them in the mission mode. We're gonna be ranking the weapons from the worst to best, and also addressing like the different weapons, what they do, what they're good at, what they're bad at. Starting first with the Enma's Fang. Enma's Fang got some things going for it. It deals a good amount of damage. It allows you to air launch many of the larger enemies, which is unique to this weapon, so that's pretty cool. The ultimate technique is also fairly good, got a ton of invul frame. Like that water dragon boss, you can totally cheese it with the Enma's Fang. But it does have some issues. I think first it lacks really good fast de-limping moves, so it's harder to get your opponent to a state where you can use an obliteration technique. I also think the attacks are just a little bit too slow, making it kind of hard to use against the quicker enemies, and it doesn't have a lot of iframes on its moves. Even like the 360 triangle isn't invincible, so that kind of puts it in the C tier, and I think it's one of the worst weapons for Ryu. It's situationally amazing, but yeah, too situational to use in a full playthrough. The next one breaks my heart because Ayane. When you're playing this game on Master Ninja, you're gonna dread the Ayane chapter because life is tough as Ayane in this game. She got good things going for her, by the way. She's really fast. She have a guillotine throw. She have a really good flying swallow. But other than that, Ayane just deals very little damage. Even a fully charged ultimate technique is not gonna end an IS enemy, which that is kind of bad. Her incidentally shuriken, that is her ranged weapon, it does like good crowd control. It can stun them, knock them down, but again, it doesn't deal enough damage. Even her Nimbo will most likely not end up opponents, so you have to work super hard with Ayane. She's really fun, but she needs to do a lot more damage to be a good contender in this game. I think she's the weakest of the girls, unfortunately. So sadly, Ayane goes into the C tier. Next up we got Rachel, and Rachel is the complete opposite of Ayane. She is really slow, doesn't have a flying swallow, doesn't have a guillotine throw, but Rachel got really good things going for her. Her ultimate technique I think is very good, it's very safe and can be absolutely abused. Her guns, and I mean her literal guns, deal massive damage to your opponents, so if you know the enemy placement, you can absolutely pretend this is a third-person shooter and cheese with it. It will absolutely shred enemies, and her regular strings like square triangle have a very high de-limp rate and can deal with the enemies well. Unfortunately for Rachel, she is far too slow and doesn't have really good ways to stun your opponents, so it is hard to play Rachel more aggressively. Instead, you will need to play a little bit more passive, wait for the openings and capitalize. I still think because of her high damage output, she is overall stronger than Ayane, and I don't hate her chapter on Master Ninja but I do think she is heavily nerfed from the original Sigma version. So Rachel goes into the B tier. Next up we goes into the Kurosai Gamma. It's the nunchucks pretty much. These are situationally really good. They are really fast, and the XX triangle can almost insta stun lock any human enemies, and it does have some strings that have really high de-limp rate, so that is very good. The forward and triangle move got amazing damage and really high de-limp rate. One of the best moves in the games, honestly, all things considered. It's a very solid weapon for Ryu, but it does lack a little bit of that oomph, especially against like the larger enemies. And I do think the ultimate technique is it's pretty mid, if I'm being honest. But overall, it's a solid weapon for Ryu. Unfortunately, there are better ones, so it goes into the B tier. Next up we got Momiji, and I do think Momiji is overall the strongest of the female characters in the game right now. She has the ability to double jump, and you can charge a UT or OT out of this, giving you some breathing room, some good damage. She does have a guillotine throw that can set up a next up Izuna drop combo, so that is good for her as well. Her bow does decent amount of damage, and I do think she has the best Ninbo out of the girls in terms of like getting knocking enemies off of you and getting knockdowns and essence from that. She does have good range on her weapon, she does have some solid combos, not that much, but what is there is pretty much solid. Her mobility overall is okay, it is below Ryu and Ayane. Her damage also is a little bit better than Ayane, but it's still significantly less than Ryu, so overall she lands on the B tier. Now moving over into the Kurasai Gamma, the chains, and this weapon have a lot of range and it is surprisingly fast, and I do think it's amazing, one of the better weapons against human enemies, because the grab enders, the grab combo enders can guarantee a D-limb, which is very special to this weapon, and it also got an ultimate technique that have a lot of range. Against human opponents, I do think it's very solid. Unfortunately, against cyborgs, against fiends, it is not all that. The OT and UT also, despite having a ton of range and really good on whiff, I do think they don't do crazy amount of damage. The weapon also doesn't give you a flying swallow, it doesn't have an Izuna drop, so it is situational, but against the right enemies I think it's very solid. Unfortunately though, it's not as good as everything that I'm gonna discuss later, so it goes into the top of the B tier for me. What do you guys think? You're convinced? I hope so. If you like the video but you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. Over 70% of my viewers aren't, so you get to see more of me and my friends, the EX-Men. And yes, like in my canon, Magneto is I recruited him. Excuse the silliness and enjoy the rest of your video. Now let's move into the really good weapons. Now we're at the A tier, starting with the Falcon Talon, the Wolverine Claws. These are ridiculous. They got by far the best flying swallow in the game because it launches enemies and you can instantly combo it into an Izuna drop, so you can clear rooms especially fast with it. It also got some techniques like the forward triangles that have a really good and high D-limb rate. It got some solid combos for bosses as well. Its counter is probably the best in the game, as the counter of the Falcon Talons got probably the highest D-limb rate in the game. The only problem you can say with the Falcon Talons is that they are more focused on singular enemies, or at least like human enemies, but they are fantastic otherwise, absolutely great weapons to use for Ryu. So it goes into the A tier for me. Moving over into the Eclipse Psyche, which I do think is fantastic. It's a lot faster than you would think it is. It does have massive range and deals a surprisingly high amount of damage. Maybe not surprisingly. This move also got a fantastic UT. The UT is Rachel's, but even better, as the range on it is fantastic, completely safe, can clear areas without having to really engage that much with it. It also does have one of the better iframe moves in the game. The 360 triangle with this one is fantastic, have a ton of invincibility frames, so you can use it in a pinch, especially useful against like boss fights. Unfortunately, it doesn't have an Izuna drop, and it does have a flying swallow, but it works a little bit differently than the other ones. So in terms of like crowd control, it's maybe not as great as some of the other weapons, but it's a very solid weapon for you overall, so absolutely goes into the A tier. Next up, we got the Lunar Staff, which I know is a fan favorite among many of the players, especially early on in a playthrough, because it's amazing. The attack speed of this weapon is so fast, and it makes it difficult for a lot of your opponent to dodge out of your combos. It does have an Izuna drop, which is really great, and because the attack speed is so fast, you can even Izuna drop Genshin, like boss Genshin with this one, and it will deal massive damage to them. And I will say, the 360 triangle, it does have an ultimate technique that deals absurd damage, absurd area of effect, insane iframes, so this one can easily cheese through many of the early rooms in the game. Lunar is fantastic, and because also a lot of its combo give you a lot of aerial time, especially against like the larger enemies, you will deal massive damage to them, so it makes it really useful. I will say the only thing about the Lunar Staff that isn't perfect is the fact that it doesn't have a flying swallow type move, so in terms of crowd control maybe, but it's an insane weapon, all things considered. If it had a flying swallow, it'd probably be SSS tier, because this thing is a thing of beauty. Absolutely goes into the A tier. The final weapon in the A tier is gonna be the Dragon Sword, and the Dragon Sword is exactly what you would expect it to be. The jack of all trades. It's fast, it got an Izuna drop, it actually got a really good flying swallow, the one that once you upgrade it, you can do multiple reps of them, can be really good against some enemies like the dogs. It does have solid combo potential, it does have good solid combo cancelling into shurikens, it does good damage overall. It's a very good well-rounded weapon, and because you have it from the start of the game, most players will be efficient at using it. It's easy to use. The string of triangle also deal really good damage, so that is useful against many of the bosses. It's very well-rounded, very good, very solid. It's just the Dragon Sword, it's a classic. So obviously it is gonna go in the A tier, but there are two other weapons in this game that, in my opinion, are completely busted and makes playing the game a different experience. Starting first with the Tonfas. The Tonfas are nuts. The Tonfas are nuts because the ultimate techniques on the Tonfas are broken. They deal massive amount of damage, almost guarantee a KO. Like the halfway charged ultimate technique will KO enemies with this one, and the fully charged one will absolutely destroy. You can destroy mobs with the Tonfas in this game. It's absolutely wild. It also got a lot of attack strings like the forward triangles that are really good against bosses. 360T also got good iframes on it. It have a flying swallow, it have an Izuna drop, the dash cancel combos are really powerful as well. The Tonfas are just absolutely wild. So they go into the S tier, but the next one, and that is probably the best weapon in the game in my opinion, the boss killer, the dual katanas, especially once you made them the blades of the Archfiend. There are two moves, the forward hold triangle and the 360 triangle. These two moves are broken. 360 triangle got so much invincibility frames that you can absolutely cheese through the game with it, and the forward hold triangle does so much damage. Probably the singular best move in the game. This is a damage weapon that also is really fast, and it got everything you want. It got a good flying swallow, it got good speed, it got good range, it got an Izuna drop. Maybe the Tonfas are better against the regular mobs, but the dual katanas is absolutely the boss killer. And that's about it for today's video. Everything I just mentioned, all weapons got their uses. You can absolutely, even like the worst one, like the Enma's Fang, have a situation that you can use. The Vigorian Flails are really good against like the fish enemies as well. So everything got its use, everything is useful in one spot or the other, and that's what I absolutely love about the Ninja Gaiden games. If you have enjoyed this video, please leave a like or a comment, it helps the channel so much. I will be leaving a link to the Patreon, Discord, Twitter and Twitch pages in the description. Thank you so much for watching and stay safe.